Hello everyone, and welcome back to the M.O.W. channel. Today, we're diving into the story of the man behind one of the most famous darknet markets in the United States, Silk Road. How did Ross William Ulbricht even come up with such a dangerous idea? Don't forget to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Let's begin today's case file. Ross William Ulbricht's story starts on March 27, 1984, in Austin, Texas. He grew up with his parents, Kirk and Lynn Ulbricht, and spent his early years living a pretty normal and model lifestyle. Ross attended West Ridge Middle School and Westlake High School in the Eanes Independent School District, graduating in 2002. He was also deeply involved in the Boy Scouts, one of the most structured youth organizations in America. He earned the rank of Eagle Scout, the highest rank you can get, something that requires leadership, dedication, and a lot of community service. This shows he wasn't some socially isolated troublemaker. He was focused, disciplined, and goal-oriented. After high school, Ross received a full scholarship to the University of Texas at Dallas. He devoted himself to academics and graduated in 2006 with a bachelor's degree in physics. His intellectual curiosity didn't stop there. He went on to Penn State University on another scholarship to pursue a master's degree in materials science and engineering, studying crystallography. But toward the end of his program, his interests shifted dramatically from natural sciences to social and economic philosophy. This was the period when Ross began forming the ideological foundation that would shape his future. He became deeply fascinated by libertarian economic theories. One of the thinkers he admired most was Ludwig von Mises of the Austrian school, an economist who argued for minimal government involvement and believed in voluntary, self-regulated markets. Ross embraced these ideas and supported libertarian politicians like Ron Paul. He also became immersed in a more radical philosophy called agorism, created by Samuel Edward Konkin III. Agorism promotes counter-economics, voluntary, non-violent exchanges that take place outside government control. The purpose is to weaken state power through free market behavior and eventually create a truly free society. Ross took part in debates, discussing these ideas and exploring ways for markets to function without government force. He later said that he drew inspiration from the novel Alongside Night and Konkin's writings, which influenced his desire to actually build such a marketplace. After graduating from Penn State in 2009, Ross returned to Austin and started experimenting with different ways to bring his ideas about economic freedom into reality. He tried day trading but wasn't successful. He attempted to start a video game company, but that also went nowhere. During this time, he started to believe he couldn't build his ideal perfect free market through regular, legal business ventures. Next, Ross teamed up with his friend Donnie Pomertree to create an online used bookstore called Good Wagon Books. The business involved collecting used books and selling them online, a very traditional form of e-commerce. But after Pomertree moved to Dallas, Ross ended up running it alone. Around this time, his attention shifted to something completely different. In his personal diary, Ross started writing about an idea for a website where people could buy anything they wanted anonymously, without leaving any trace behind. This was the beginning of what would become Silk Road, originally called Underground Brokers. According to an ex-girlfriend, Ross mentioned the concept to her, and she compared it to the ancient Silk Road in Asia, an enormous trade network. Ross loved the comparison and thought it was the perfect name for what he wanted to build. He even hinted at his plan on his public LinkedIn page. Ross wrote about wanting to use economic theory as a means to abolish the use of coercion and aggression among mankind, and described his goal as creating an economic simulation where people can experience what it's like to live in a world without systemic use of force. These statements reveal that, in his mind, Silk Road wasn't just an illegal drug marketplace, it was a grand social experiment reflecting his deep libertarian beliefs. Ross Ulbricht's early life, education, and ideological growth provide the foundation for understanding how he came to create such a massive darknet market. It all started with a driven, idealistic man, whose belief in total economic freedom eventually led him down a very dangerous path. While Ross Ulbricht was running his used book business, Good Wagon Books, in Austin, he was becoming increasingly obsessed with building what he called an economic simulation that could bring his libertarian ideals to life. This project would eventually become Silk Road. His main goal was to create a truly free market, one completely untouched by government rules, oversight, or any sort of traceability. To do that, he combined the strongest anonymity and security technologies available at the time. Silk Road wasn't reachable through the normal internet, the so-called clearnet. Instead, it operated as a hidden service inside the Tor network. Tor uses something called onion routing, which encrypts and bounces internet traffic randomly through multiple relay nodes all over the world. By layering the encryption and routing like an onion, it becomes extremely difficult to track where data comes from or where it's going. By hosting Silk Road as a Tor onion service, Ulbricht could hide the server's real IP address and physical location from government or law enforcement. This level of anonymity was crucial. It protected the stability of the marketplace, as well as the identities of buyers and sellers. For Ross, Tor wasn't just a tool. It was the technological wall that made his vision of a government-free market possible. But anonymity in transactions required anonymous money as well. That's where Bitcoin came in. In 2011, Bitcoin was still pretty new, but Silk Road became one of the first and most important platforms to use it on a large scale. All Bitcoin transactions are recorded on the blockchain, a public ledger that anyone can view. But the system doesn't require people to use their real names. Ulbricht encouraged users to create Bitcoin wallets without any identifying information, which meant they could buy and sell goods while staying largely anonymous. This adoption of a stateless currency fit perfectly with Ross's agorist philosophy and alternative economy operating outside government control. As the operator of the site, Ulbricht used the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts. The name comes from the 1987 movie The Princess Bride, where the identity of the Dread Pirate Roberts is passed down from person to person behind a mask. Ross liked that symbolism. It allowed him to act as the all-powerful leader of the marketplace while remaining an untouchable ghost. Under this name, he set the rules, resolved disputes, and maintained order. He wasn't just running a website. He was, in many ways, acting as the leader of a new, anonymous digital nation. Silk Road didn't just rely on anonymity. It added several layers of safety and structure to keep the marketplace functioning. One of the most important features was the escrow system. When a buyer paid in Bitcoin, the payment didn't go straight to the seller. Instead, Silk Road held it in escrow. Only after the buyer confirmed that they received the product would the funds be released to the seller. This was essential in an anonymous environment. It prevented scams and allowed Silk Road to act as the trusted middleman, collecting commission fees in the process. Those fees earned Ulbricht a massive amount of money. Silk Road also introduced a detailed rating and feedback system. Buyers could publicly review product quality, shipping speed, and seller reliability. This helped trustworthy sellers build a good reputation and weeded out low-quality ones. Ross pointed to this as proof that a perfect market could exist without any government regulation, just peer-driven trust and competition. In short, Chapter 2 shows how Ross Ulbricht used Tor, Bitcoin, escrow, and reputation systems to build a technologically fortified marketplace that was fully anonymous. It makes clear that he wasn't simply running a website for selling drugs. He was trying to design a parallel society, a counter-economy based on libertarian philosophy, operating far beyond the reach of any state. As Silk Road continued to thrive behind the anonymity of Tor and Bitcoin, the marketplace started to look like a serious and unprecedented threat to law enforcement around the world. Despite the fortress-like security Ross Ulbricht had built, agencies including the FBI, DEA, IRS, and DHS launched a massive, coordinated international investigation. This phase marks the moment when Ross's idealistic marketplace began to collapse. Under the pressure of real-world legal authority, the methods used to uncover Ulbricht's identity were complex and multi-layered. One major tactic was undercover infiltration. A DEA agent secretly gained access to Silk Road, posing as a seller and eventually as one of its trusted administrators. Through this position, he collected crucial information: internal messages, operational details, and direct chat logs with Dread Pirate Roberts DPR. During the analysis of these communications, investigators noticed that DPR's timestamps were consistently set to Pacific Standard Time (PST). That small detail suggested that DPR Ulbricht was likely living somewhere on the U.S. West Coast, helping investigators narrow down their search. Another major breakthrough came when authorities managed to seize the Silk Road server in Iceland, through cooperation with international partners. Even though the server was hidden behind Tor, physically obtaining it gave investigators key technical evidence about how the site operated and how traffic flowed. Combined with the inside intel from undercover agents, the walls around Ulbricht began closing in. But the most decisive piece of evidence came from an early promotional mistake. IRS criminal investigator Gary Alford, who joined the Silk Road investigation, traced old online forum posts that promoted Silk Road in its earliest days. Alford found a 2011 post on a Bitcoin forum, written by a user named Altoids advertising Silk Road. Later, the same Altoids asked for programming help on another forum, and this time he accidentally revealed his email address. That email contained Ross Ulbricht's full name. This simple but devastating connection proved that Altoids, the person promoting Silk Road from the very beginning, was Ross Ulbricht himself. These Altoids posts became the most direct evidence linking Ross to his anonymous identity. With these combined clues, technical data, undercover work, and the fatal promotional slip. Investigators became certain that Ulbricht was living in San Francisco and running Silk Road from public libraries. What pushed the situation into its darkest territory were the murder-for-hire allegations. Law enforcement discovered message logs suggesting that Ulbricht had tried to pay more than $730,000 for at least 5 contract killings, targeting people who threatened to expose Silk Road or disrupt its operations. One of the alleged targets was even a former Silk Road administrator. Although prosecutors later admitted there was no proof any killings actually happened, the very existence of these messages destroyed Ulbricht's image and painted him as far more dangerous than just a digital black market operator. These allegations were not part of the official charges in his New York trial, but the judge considered them when sentencing him to life in prison, citing his moral corruption and the potential danger he posed. This episode demonstrated how Ulbricht's libertarian dream had warped into something violent and criminal, marking the darkest turning point of his story. In the end, Chapter 3 shows how the layers of anonymity Ulbricht built were ultimately torn down by relentless investigation, one critical mistake, and the violent impulses that emerged from within Silk Road itself. It's a clear reminder that no matter how perfect a system looks on a technical level, it can still crumble under human weakness and the power of the state. On October 1, 2013, Ross Ulbricht's secret online empire came to an abrupt and dramatic end at the Glen Park branch of the San Francisco Public Library. After investigators confirmed his identity and location, they launched an operation right inside the library, where Ulbricht had been using the public Wi-Fi to run Silk Road. This wasn't just a simple arrest, it was the carefully planned finale of a strategy designed to prevent him from destroying critical evidence. At the moment of the arrest, Ulbricht had his laptop open and running. Investigators were most worried that he might slam the laptop shut or trigger encryption software to wipe evidence if he sensed trouble. To stop that from happening, FBI agents used a clever distraction. 2 agents staged a loud argument inside the library, grabbing Ulbricht's attention for just a few seconds. During that brief window, several agents moved in fast and took him down. At the same time, another agent secured the laptop and immediately passed it to Agent Thomas Kiernan. Kiernan plugged in a pre-prepared flash drive before the laptop could lock or power off, copying essential files tied to the operation of Silk Road. This quick and precise digital forensic move captured the strongest evidence linking Ulbricht to the site's command center. After the arrest and evidence seizure, Ulbricht was held without bail. What followed became one of the trials of the decade. On February 4, 2014, Ulbricht was indicted in federal court in New York. The main charge was participating in a continuing criminal enterprise, CCE, a very serious accusation, usually reserved for major drug cartel leaders. With this, prosecutors framed his actions not as simple hacking or online scams, but as a sophisticated organized crime operation. He was also charged with conspiracy to traffic drugs, conspiracy to launder money, trafficking fraudulent IDs, and conspiracy to commit computer hacking. The trial began on January 13, 2015. Prosecutors presented chat logs from the Dread Pirate, Robert's account, entries from Ulbricht's personal journal, and the evidence found on his laptop as their key pillars. They argued that Silk Road wasn't just a marketplace for illegal goods. Ulbricht had also considered using violence to protect his business and profits. The alleged murder-for-hire discussions weighed heavily on the jury as they assessed his character and intentions. Ulbricht's defense team argued a multiple DPR theory, claiming that while Ulbricht may have created Silk Road, he wasn't the one operating it near the time of his arrest. They suggested he had stepped away from the project or been framed, but prosecutors countered these claims with the overwhelming evidence and insider details found on his laptop. On February 4, 2015, after about a month of proceedings, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all charges. The ruling was seen as one of the most significant legal victories in the history of darknet law enforcement. Ulbricht was sentenced on May 29, 2015. The judge emphasized the enormous harm caused by the platform, especially its role in drug distribution and the disturbing murder-for-hire allegations. Ulbricht received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 40 years. In practice, it meant he would spend the rest of his life in prison. The court also ordered him to pay $183 million in restitution, based on the total sales of illegal drugs and fake IDs exchanged through Silk Road. The severity of the sentence sparked major controversy among his supporters and within libertarian circles. Many argued that because Ulbricht hadn't committed violence himself, applying a CCE charge normally reserved for ruthless cartel leaders and giving him such extreme prison time was an excessive punishment for an internet crime. The case has since become a powerful example of the clash between technological freedom and government authority. Dismissal of legal appeals. Ross Ulbricht and his legal team spent years arguing that both his trial and his sentence were unjust, filing appeal after appeal. One of their biggest arguments centered on corruption during the investigation. After Ulbricht's conviction, it was revealed that DEA agent Karl Mark Force and Secret Service agent Sean Bridges, both involved in the Silk Road investigation, had been stealing money and committing fraud. They were later convicted on charges including wire fraud and money laundering. Ulbricht's team argued that prosecutors illegally hid evidence of the agent's misconduct, and that this violated his right to due process and a fair trial. But the courts rejected that argument, saying that corruption wasn't significant enough to impact the jury's verdict. In January 2016, Ulbricht formally appealed both his conviction and sentence to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Oral arguments were heard in October 2016. In May 2017, the appeals court issued its decision. Ulbricht's conviction and sentence would stand. The judges ruled that neither the trial nor the sentence was procedurally or substantively unreasonable. They also emphasized that there was overwhelming evidence he had attempted murder for hire, which justified the harshness of his sentence. As a last resort, in December 2017, Ulbricht filed a petition with the U.S. Supreme Court. The petition raised two major constitutional issues. First, whether collecting a person's internet traffic data without a warrant violates the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches. This challenged the legality of the surveillance used in Ulbricht's case. Second, whether the Sixth Amendment allows a judge, not a jury, to make factual findings, such as the murder for hire allegations that support an unusually severe sentence. The National Lawyers Guild, the Reason Foundation, and 21 additional legal scholars filed briefs supporting Ulbricht. But on June 28, 2018, the Supreme Court declined to hear the case. Every possible legal avenue had officially been exhausted. The Free Ross movement gains political momentum. With legal options shut down, the Free Ross movement, started by Ulbricht's mother, Lynn Ulbricht, grew into a nationwide campaign. The group aimed to change public opinion about Ulbricht's extreme sentence and push for either a presidential pardon or commutation. Through social media outreach, public events, and merchandise sales, the movement gained huge visibility and eventually gathered more than 600,000 signatures. The campaign earned strong support from libertarians and the cryptocurrency community. Libertarians saw Ulbricht as a non-violent offender who became a symbol of government overreach. Crypto supporters viewed him as a pioneer who helped boost early Bitcoin adoption through Silk Road. Libertarian politicians and prison reform advocates also joined the movement. The campaign's political influence peaked during the 2024 election cycle. In May 2024, at a Bitcoin conference in Nashville, presidential candidate Donald Trump announced that if re-elected, he would commute Ulbricht's sentence on his first day in office. The promise energized many crypto voters, turning Ulbricht's release into a single-issue cause for a large portion of the community. Some analysts later claimed this pledge was the result of a political deal, pointing to a 2023 meeting where Libertarian Party Chair Angela McArdle reportedly told Trump that freeing Ulbricht would help him win Libertarian votes. The presidential pardon and dramatic release. On January 21, 2025, President Donald Trump fulfilled the promise he made at the 2024 Libertarian Convention and granted Ross Ulbricht a full, unconditional pardon. Trump announced the decision on his platform, Truth Social, calling Ulbricht's sentence to life terms plus 40 years ridiculous. He claimed that the same crazy people who prosecuted Ulbricht were also involved in weaponizing the government for political purposes. The reaction was instant and intense. Ulbricht's supporters and the crypto community celebrated the decision, calling it a victory for free markets and digital freedom. Critics, however, blasted the pardon. They pointed out the irony. Trump had repeatedly argued that drug dealers should receive the death penalty, yet he pardoned the creator of the biggest online drug marketplace in history. Many media outlets also accused Trump of using the pardon as a political tool. That same evening, Ross Ulbricht walked out of a federal prison in Arizona, ending 12 years behind bars. Photos of him reuniting with his mother, his wife, and other family members quickly spread across social media. His release didn't just mark the end of his personal ordeal, it symbolized the closing of a major chapter in the national debates surrounding the darknet, cryptocurrency, and the government's punishment of ideological offenders. That's it for today's story. If you want to hear more mysterious events happening in the world we know and in worlds we don't, and more shocking cases that defy common sense, make sure you subscribe, like, and turn on notifications for my channel. Thanks for watching.